Hello, welcome to this session of Talking Tech, Women and Girls in ICT. My name is Jenny Park, and today I am delighted to be representing the ITU, and I am excited to have a discussion about esports and gaming with Eefje Depoortere, best known as former host of the European League of Legends Championship Series. Talking Tech is a series celebrating girls and women in tech being recorded around the world between Girls in ICT Day 2020 and Girls in ICT Day 2021. Girls in ICT Day is an international day marked on the fourth Thursday of each April. In 2020, Girls in ICT Day was April 23rd. The objectives of Girls in ICT Day are to help to create a global environment that empowers and encourages girls and young women to consider studies and careers in the growing field of information and communication technologies. The Talking Tech series is brought to you by the ITU, UNICC, and is in support of Equals, the global partnership for gender equality in the digital age. The goals of the series include interest in inspiring girls and younger women with information about a range of ICT careers that can be had, bringing before a broader audience some of the role model women in tech and share information about their career journeys and work, offer diverse examples of how ICT is being used to support achievement of the SDGs and other UN goals, showcase initiatives that are working with girls to support them in ICT studies or future ICT careers, and provide girls and young women in tech with a leadership opportunity to represent and promote a girls in tech organization with which they are involved and promote it to a broader international audience. To kick this session off, I am going to introduce you to Shux, currently a freelance esports host and still actively involved with one of the most popular games in the world, League of Legends. She was recognized as a Forbes 30 Under 30 for games in 2016 and also received the Best Esports Host Award at the Game Awards ceremony in 2018. As a gamer, I, alongside many other women, have looked up to women like Shux who have been successful in the gaming industry. With that, Shux, could you broadly define esports for viewers who may not have knowledge about this field, and also describe when and how you got into esports?
I could also thank you very much for that amazing introduction. So esports, you compare it to anything you know of a sports competition with a sport that you're familiar with. It could be football or soccer, if you're American, could be basketball, whatever. You know that there's always big competitions, both nationally and internationally, where the athletes that are the best in their field get to compete for championships, for fame, and for both national and international titles. Well, esports is the same thing, but for people who are professional gamers. So they are so good at a certain game that they are in a team or by themselves, and they compete in professional circuits for fame, fortune, and the victories. There you go.
And so can you give us give me an example, or basically tell me how you became interested in esports and how you started in this field?
Absolutely. I personally was always very interested in sports growing up. I wasn't actually the best at sports like myself, but I loved watching competitions, basically anything that was on TV or in the newspaper or, you know, in the backyard if people were playing and I would join in. And I'd always been very interested in sport, most notably soccer, which is very popular here in Europe, cycling and tennis. And as I went through my studies at university, I got my master's in journalism with the eye on being a sports reporter because I wanted to be professional in that field. And I just wanted to cover mostly soccer, football, so the European viewers don't get too angry at me. And that was basically the goal. But as I arrived at the end of my studies, I was intimidated with kind of, okay, this is such a big business and a male-dominated field. And how do I even get started? And how do I even muster up the courage to start? So instead, after graduating, I fell back into a hobby, a lifelong hobby of mine that I had to pause a little bit because I was studying, which is gaming. And after a little while of playing League, which I fell in love with, like so many people, a friend linked me to this broadcast, which was a 2012 ESL broadcast. And it was so big. And I watched it and I remember thinking, well, this is just like a football game to me. These people are cheering on their favorite players and they're competing at the highest level. So why don't I try and kind of apply what I learned in my journalism studies for sports to this esports world, which to me, it's the same. It's high level competition. And that's how I got started.
Wow, that's amazing. I also read that you were also a competitive gamer as well. Could you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yes, gladly so. It's been so long ago. I used to be semi-competitive. I would say competitive, but it's not the same as it is now. Like the scene was
Sure.
totally not as developed, but in Unreal Tournament 1999, so a game that came out almost 20 years ago. And yeah, I played in a team, in a clan. We had
Oh,
practice
that's
wars.
amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it was amazing. My parents didn't think so. Or my mom, she was like,
Right.
what are you doing? And I'm like, Mom, can you drive me to this LAN party this weekend? Like, with who? And I'm like, oh, just these people I know off the internet. And it was like, but yeah, I was pretty good at that game, and that will forever be my claim to fame in terms of
Right.
actually being good at the game.
So, I mean, it's great to hear that you actually had an interest in esports before fully considering pursuing a career in esports. And it's interesting to hear that you even competed even before maybe esports became this big scene that we know today.
Yeah.
So I'm just a little bit curious how you talked about how you became more interested in esports following your master's degree, but how did you become, one of the top entertainers in esports? What was that path like?
Well, a complicated journey, I wouldn't necessarily say, but it all happened really fast from my perspective. When I studied journalism for sports coverage, it was written. So the first companies I applied to cover esports, I also wrote articles, and lots of them. And for one of them, SK Gaming, they asked me at what point if I wanted to do something with the camera, if I wanted to go to DreamHack and interview the players and interview the fans, also cut that footage and just make sure that we had coverage for the YouTube channel, which I found very intimidating, but I think like anybody. But yeah, I ended up giving a shot, and I did that for about a year on and off, which was pretty hectic until Riot Games launched their League of Legends Championship Series across EU and NA, and they considered me as the host for that, which was a totally different thing, because you have to imagine we went from me filming things like kind of now in lockdown, kind of at home with the webcam, or at an event with a shabby camera and a shady mic, into a professional studio with a teleprompter and 4 cameras and stylists and makeup and, script you have to hit and all these people watching, which was pretty insane to me, never having received any formal training. Actually, none of us, to be in front of the camera. Yeah.
Okay.
I remember very distinctly, we had some people who were professionals the day before and were like, have you ever read a teleprompter? What is a teleprompter? Like, we don't know. But I think that's also part of the charm of esports, to be honest. And yeah, things absolutely took off from there. Which is now history. It started off in 2013. And I think League esports has been a big part of kind of the explosion of global esports and products as well. And we just kind of went on that wave. And I didn't think too much about, oh, now there's this many people watching. Now there's this many people watching. I just kind of focused on doing the best job I could.
Mm-hmm. And honestly, you are in such a unique position because esports is a developing field. It's growing in popularity. And I guess I'm just curious, with all of your experiences, what you like most about gaming, what you like most about your job, even some things that you've learned along the way.
For sure. I think if I apply it to esports specifically, the best thing about my job is, like, to me, this is just heart racing stuff, watching any competition, and especially the League of Legends competitions and Counter-Strike competitions, because you're so close to a lot of the players and the teams, because it's your job to follow their stories. It's your job to find out everything about them and to cover them in their best moments and their worst moments, and maybe their most emotional moments. And I think being on the forefront of that and finding a way to translate that as good as possible to everyone watching is such a blessing. And when you work in gaming and when you work in esports and you are exposed to games so much, you sometimes don't feel like doing it anymore in your free time. And I know that's almost blasphemous to say, but especially with League. And after a while, I was like, in my free time, I don't want to play League. I want to play something completely different. And I've always just found great kind of even refuge in open world story games like the Far Cries and The Last of Us and Tomb Raider. Tomb Raider, like, that was one of my first, where you can get lost in. And yeah, to me, it's like a movie, because people often say, well, why is it so cool? It's like, it's a movie, but you get to play in it and you get to make your own decisions and you get to get completely lost in this beautiful scenery and this beautiful story. And that's awesome.
And honestly, it's good to hear that you found games that you still enjoy. And of course, you still enjoy League of Legends, but even outside of that. So with everything that you have done, especially for the world of gaming, can you just share an example of maybe 1 or 2 things that you have done, particularly with esports, that you're proud of?
It's not something you put in your career plan or in your life plan or whatnot.
Definitely.
But finding out kind of after a couple of years how people considered me kind of a beacon for the rise of women in esports, and especially getting a lot of personal accounts of women coming up to me and saying, hey, I took this step because, you know, I saw you. And then also getting to work with many of these women like Ovali over in NA and stuff like that. That's just incredible. And it's never something you kind of think of actively about, oh, I want to be this, or I didn't at least. But that's been really awesome. And there's so many heartwarming examples of, for instance, one that I always remember is a couple of years ago when a father came to an esports event with a daughter. And I think the daughter was only like 7 or 8 years old. And she was dressed up in the getup of, I believe it was Fnatic. And he just came to me and he said, you know, thanks to you and thanks to what you all do, I see it. And I want her to feel safe to pursue a career in esports or in gaming. And yeah, those are the things that always stick with me for sure.
Thank you for sharing that. And honestly, it's a perfect segue into basically getting into the nitty gritty of esports. We both know that esports is definitely a male dominated industry. So I'm very curious about your experiences, especially being at the forefront of that. Have you experienced any discrimination or even difficulties in gaining respect in your position?
Yeah. So like the first thing I want to say is that there's still so much work to do. But I do want to call out the fact that ever since I began 10 years ago, there have been so many more women that have stepped up in front of the camera and behind the camera, which I think sometimes we forget when we talk about, oh, you know, we kind of count how many visible women are there in broadcast or whatever, but there's so many more behind the scenes and there's only been more and more. So that's a good thing. But regardless of that, yeah, there's been discrimination in all shapes and forms. And like the thing that sucks the most is that you always get, and I still get, and I've been doing this for 10 years, I think, like, it's insane. You get the, do you even play games? Like, I bet you don't play games. I bet you don't know what games are. You're here, you're taking a job from someone who actually deserves it. You're only here to fill the quota, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I very early on also just wanted to think fairly of that. Like for me, so it's like, well, is that true? And it's like, I know it's not true, but have I gotten 1 or 2 chances because I knew they were looking for a female host? Probably yes. And I think we shouldn't be afraid to say that. But the thing is that even if you then get a position like that, you have to prove yourself 1,000 times more than a male colleague who would have done the same job. And you get called out on mistakes that they wouldn't, and on behavior that they wouldn't. And that is just so frustrating. And I think one of the most frustrating things is that it's not only in the public that kind of perceive your work and that speak up on all these things, but I also noticed it internally in companies that I worked for and bosses that I worked for who would not take me as seriously in situations as they would my male colleagues, especially in the beginning. They would call me emotional when I thought I was making a level-headed yet, yes, emotional, but just with emotion in it because I cared about the topic, plea for a certain thing. Yes, passionate in a certain meeting, whilst, you know, other people would raise their voice and that would be fine. And that's always been very hard to navigate. But yeah, I think as I've grown more confident, I've gotten better equipped with dealing with it, but it doesn't mean that I should even have to deal with it in the first place.
Right. And I guess I'm curious, did you experience many of these difficulties early on in your career, or is it still ongoing today? And how do you address challenges like these in the workplace?
Well, I think from the public perception, it's like both have gotten better for me personally, because the public perception, I think a lot of people kind of grew up with me, so to say.
Right,
and
definitely.
Yeah, so there's a lot of people that also wouldn't question because I'm just part of the crew and I have a track record. But I do see it with like new viewers and just the people that just are always going to be negative, and that sucks. But that's definitely less. Internally, I would say it's also less, and I think strides have been made in the last 10 years. But a lot of that also has to do with my confidence levels in the workplace and how I'm willing to call things out and not afraid to step out of my comfort zone to call out things that I see from colleagues and things that they deal with. But I don't think you can push that on anyone and that's why it's so tricky, because I've seen similar situations that I've been in 10 years ago of women that have just taken a similar position 3 years ago. And I do take it upon myself to guide them as good as I can in that situation. But you can't be mad at someone for not putting themselves completely out there on their first day of work, right? But I think that's something that we're working towards so that nobody has to feel that way on the work floor anymore. Yeah, it's so tricky.
It's honestly a difficult position, because if it is a male-dominated industry and you're trying to navigate your career while discussing these sensitive issues with men, it's hard to navigate those conversations. And I don't think it's something that occurs just in esports, but in other areas of the workforce as well. So do you have any advice for people who maybe even currently going through that situation now?
Yeah, I think about this all the time because I also want to be very careful, and like my experience is not everyone's experience.
Definitely.
And we should be mindful of that too.
Mm-hmm.
Something that has helped me, but I can understand might not help everyone in the same vein, is from very early on when I started recognizing the misogyny, both in the community from the perception I got and unfortunately from my peers, is that I told myself I wasn't going to be defined by that misogyny by other people and what they put on me. And the only thing that I would be defined by is how good I have done and what I can work on and what really matters, and that isn't tainted by anything. Because if I have to stand still with everything and think, was that actual criticism, or was it because they don't want to see a woman in this position, I was just going to lose a lot of time and frankly a lot of brain cells. So what I learned, and what I always tell new women in this position as well, is surround yourself with peers that you trust and colleagues and even managers, although that's the thing, you obviously don't always have a choice in that, but you can surround yourself outside of that from people who can give you level-headed, correct advice, with people who have the same values as you do, who won't put you down for reasons that are not important to your work. And that has helped me a lot, because it can be really frustrating because you're second guessing yourself so much. You're like, well, this person said that, but is that really true or not? And
and being a public face, it must become draining, constantly dealing with all of that criticism, with all of those comments. And I know that you also mentioned, Avali coming into the league stage. She's fairly young, and I know that she also faced a lot of criticism when she first became, a prominent figure in league. So I guess my question to you in that case is, someone, you're very active on social media, you're always on Twitch, you are a public face of league. So how do you navigate this perception of the male gaze, or handling all of these criticisms and comments that men, since it is a male-dominated industry, say towards you?
Yeah, it's really, really tricky. I want to say about Avali also, Avali is such a champ. She deals with all this stuff so much better than I even could. And I remember talking to her a lot, and I was like, oh, I saw this pop up and I'm sorry, I just wanted to check in and see if you were okay. And she's like, I don't care, I'm doing my thing. And I was like, yes. I was like, yes, if this is like, if this is what people can do going forward, that's where we want to be, right? Well, we don't want that behavior to be there, but that's where we want to be.
She's very strong. She seems like a very strong person.
Yes, incredibly so. But yeah, in terms of kind of the male gaze as well, it's such a tricky one, especially with, and this is where it's always so blatantly obvious, is, for instance, things that, male colleagues will not get told, you will get told as a woman so much quicker. I'm thinking most notably last year when I received an award for Best Host of 2019.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But anyway, I woke up because that was at night. So it was like an American award show. So I woke up and I didn't think I was going to win. And I woke up and I checked and got a message. I was like, oh my God, that's so cool, because, it's cool. And
of course,
it's not like a Nobel Prize, but we're still going to be happy. And the same thing, there was already like a thread on Reddit. There was this big discussion, and there's like so much discussion about like, well, yeah, she doesn't deserve it because she posted bikini photos, because I'd been on holiday the week before and on a beach, I was wearing a bikini. Well,
what's wrong with that?
Exactly. And I like, the thing is, the caveat is, I also know if I like post certain pictures on Instagram, or even like, an evening dress or whatever, I also know I'm inviting a certain type of comments. Like, let's not beat around the bush here. That's also just, we are in the public eye, and some people are very nice and very kind, and then some people are perverted, and then some people use it as a tool to discredit my work. And it's kind of like, I cannot respect you anymore, I cannot support you anymore, because I've seen you in this low plunging dress or in a bikini, or saw you having a drink with your friends, with your girlfriends and stuff. And it's like, that is such a huge double standard that is
Right.
so annoying, because that would never happen the other way around, right? And that's been particularly hard for me to navigate, because I've also grown up so much. I mean, I started when I was 23 and I'm 33 now. I'm a totally different person. I'm a woman who's confident in her own skin, and you know, has come to terms with her own body and her own personal life and kind of all the choices I make. And I can understand that people would have something to say about that. And I get it. Not everyone would post a picture in bikini. Totally fine with me. But to equate it with, you now have lost all of your like points. So you're not professional anymore. You can't do your job anymore. That is just so vile.
Right. It must be frustrating, especially because you've built so long building up your credibility, that just posting a picture kind of negates that. That doesn't seem right. Has it encouraged you, or have you thought about, you know, not posting, or has that influenced you in any way? Or have you stuck to your principles, basically just saying, you know, I'm going to do me, move forward, and navigate it that way?
I mean, to think that I don't think about it would be lying, because I think we all like to pretend, if you're in the public eye, that it doesn't bother you, but of course it does, especially when it comes to your kind of integrity and levels of professionalism. So I definitely thought about it, but in the last years, it's been more towards, I'm going to do what I do, and that's that, because I'm continuously thriving in my career, and I'm continuously taking steps forward, and I've overcome hardships and I've grown from those. And you know, it's been more of a I'll do me, and I'll also do a great job every day and keep building my career, and that's that.
Well, I'd like to say that I followed you as well, and I've seen you thrive in your career. So congratulations for that. And I'm glad that it hasn't affected you to that extent, even though you shouldn't have to deal with that, honestly.
Thank you.
But we have talked about how gaming really is completely male dominated, but we haven't really addressed why that is. So why do you believe that there is such a lack of women in gaming?
I think it's so many different things. I think first off, it's also kind of that whole moniker of that's a boy hobby to have, or that's a male hobby to have, which I dealt with tons actually from my family and from my friends 10 years ago. And, you know, and I think that's such BS, if I can say that, because people like what they like. Doesn't matter. I used to play with Legos one day and Barbies the next, and I would play video games and I would play with my dollhouse and whatever. It doesn't matter. It doesn't define you. You should be able to play what you want. And I do think that is changing, just because gaming is such a widespread interest and is so readily available on every platform, because it's not just the hardcore gamer on the PlayStation who's playing COD or whatever. It's also just Animal Crossing and Facebook games and literally everything, you know, there's
phone apps.
Yes, there we go. Like, it's everything. And I think the democratization of games and the fact that it's so widespread should definitely help shake that off. And
hopefully.
And the main thing is that a lot of parents and other people, I think, still shed a negative light on gaming, and then especially for women, as in that's not something you belong in, which is obviously absolutely not true. And I think also the fact what the things I've just named, in terms of, you know, if you get into a lobby of an online game and they hear you're a girl or you're female, you will more often than not deal with a ton of harassment and you know, kind of not just being appreciated for what you do, which is kicking people's ass in this game. And you know, the same with what we've seen with pro female players that just completely get their track record discredited and questioned if they are even women, and like that absolutely shouldn't matter. And that's why that door looks so closed, I think, to so many women and girls, and where we all have a job to show that shouldn't be the case, and that everyone's welcome.
I definitely agree. I remember so I used to compete in Tetris tournaments occasionally. Oh, awesome. And I remember one of the first in-person Tetris tournaments I went to, the male participants basically just wanted to sit me in the audience section because they didn't see any other girls participating. And they asked, you know, who's your boyfriend or who are you supporting? And I was like, no, I actually want to play this game. And they didn't believe. It took such a long time to convince them. But I completely agree. And so I guess I'm curious, based off of what you just said, do you think that there's a need to encourage women to become more involved in esports? And also, you know, you mentioned how you mentored or you serve as a mentor for a lot of women entering the field. So how do we encourage more women to pursue their interests? Is it mentorship, or is it just encouraging them to pursue their interests? How do we get more women involved?
Yeah, I think it's up to everyone who's in the gaming sphere to make clear that it's an inclusive space where everybody can compete, everyone can work, everyone can thrive. And that works on so many levels. As I said, you know, within these companies, in these gaming companies, that can't happen anymore. And people have to stand up in these companies respectively to make sure that it is an inclusive situation for everyone. And I think there should be more outward signals. And as you say, mentorship, as you say, leading by example, but maybe also just more campaigns by organizations and by gaming companies and all that. And, you know, it's hard because you don't want to make it seem like, oh, you know, come join us. Like you're allowed, like, cause you couldn't do it on your own. No, it's the opposite. It's more like, give it a natural, like more women should be included in all the ad campaigns for all the gaming gear and all that should be not questioned. There should be, you know, harder punishment and education for people that continue to harass women that step onto the scene or in voice chat or whatever, all those things. And it's such a big movement. And I keep thinking about, because sometimes I think, oh, we've really taken a step forward, and then something happens and I just think we've taken 10 steps back again.
Right,
so we can never forget that this is a hugely important thing, because there's so much work to be done.
Definitely. And just following up to that, you know, a little bit of a controversial question, but why are there not more women in competitive esports? League of Legends, for example. Is it truly, and I'm just asking this as a hypothetical, that men are better than women at esports? Is it the situation? Why do you think there are not, you know, challenger women that are competing on the esports scene?
I think it's a very layered thing. And first off, there's no way that women should have any reason to be worse than men at video games. If we look at kind of every study that's been done, I think one, again, and we keep coming back to this, but the fact that there's so much discrimination and harassment, and that seems like commonplace is a huge thing. I also think, you know, even though esports has become this big business, there are still a lot of things to be done in terms of kind of guidance of the young people that in the end up being the pro players and the core of the esports business, you know, male or female, everyone, especially the young people that get thrown into this hyper competitive, public on social media, enormously pressurized situation where all of a sudden they have to compete, and it's to make a living. And if not, they're going to get all these people on their back, like yelling at them online and whatnot, and under pressure from the organizations as well. And structurally, I think there's a lot of work that can still be done there, starting with making that a more inclusive situation for women as well. I think the first kind of area where we're going to see a lot more female gamers that go pro going up, and I think it's happening already, are the sports that you, or the esports that you can play by yourself, and that the org kind of gives you, you know, good surroundings for you to compete, because then you don't have to be in a team with other people. And I'm not saying women can't be team players. I think actually quite the opposite.
Right, for sure.
But if you think about, for instance, a League of Legends team, that's 5 young people, 17 to, let's say, 26 years old. You know, if you throw in then a woman in the mix who all of a sudden is in there, a lot of things that work now can't work like that anymore. You need proper, you know, you need to focus on that psychologically and mentally. Not everyone can live together in a house just like that. I think regardless, that's not the best idea. And I think, you know, all these things are things that are still being looked at and are changing. Just the guidance of young people and of these pros in general. So I think that's also a big factor.
A lot of individuals, and I guess this is personal curiosity, have talked about creating women's leagues and men's leagues in different gaming scenes. What do you think about that? Especially saying that women can be just as good as men.
So I'm always double on the whole female tournaments versus male tournaments and the separation, just because in the end, that's not what you want, right? Because in the end, what you want is for everyone to just compete in the same league and it be mixed and whatnot. And so I don't necessarily like the idea, just because what I have seen, it has not been done correctly. It hasn't been kind of an initiative to support all women to kind of feel safe and do it. It's been like pink headsets only and like these sexy photo shoots and like, or from a lot of what I've seen, which is not what you want at all, because you also definitely don't want to stereotype the women that either way that are playing. But I do think if it is done correctly and if it has enough support, and I think we saw an example in a study, I don't exactly remember, but it was female soccer in Australia or something. And that there we saw that just having the all-female leagues in the beginning just got obviously a lot more girls to kind of do what they wanted to do, because now they saw other people that are doing it. And obviously that's a sport that's still segregated. But I think in esports, it can work the way that, you know, if there are correct initiatives, and this is what I have to just emphasize, for the right reasons and with kind of, everything done correctly. I can't find the word now in English. That could help in the long run, but we have to have the long run in thoughts as well. Like it all has to be to make women feel safe and feel accepted and feel like they can do whatever they want to do.
Right, like having the right infrastructure before actually starting it up. That makes sense. So I guess since the series is about girls and women in technology, in regards to esports specifically, do you have any career advice or any advice for girls and younger women who are interested in esports or starting a career in esports?
Yeah, I just think first off, just go for it, and don't let anything stop you. And also, like, esports is such a big field, and I get a lot of people that say, oh, I want to be a shoutcaster or whatever, and it's like the possibilities are endless. Just if you feel like you want to contribute and you don't really know how, just look into every kind of part that there is. Because you could be a graphic designer, you could be a game designer, you can be a caster, you could be a producer. Like, there is so much that you could contribute in, which could align with something that you're already very knowledgeable in, something you're studying or this and that. And when it comes to women specifically, it's go your own course and focus on yourself. And I say surround yourself with the peers that you can trust and that can lift you up when you need to. And not like, and I know how hard this is, because it's not just like, oh, speak up, you know, but take into account that you are your own strongest fan, like your biggest propagator, and you have to stand up for yourself, and you can stand up for yourself in this world. And the sky is the limit for every woman who wants to start in esports.
That's very
I'm very hard, but I'm hard at like inspirational speeches.
Right. No, I think you just did it perfectly. I feel inspired, so I think you did a good job. All right, so looking ahead and just reflecting upon your career as well as the esports field in general, is there any lessons that you learned along the way that you'd like to share to other women who are interested in esports?
Yeah, I feel like I have to repeat myself, but
problem.
kind of just a TLDR of what I've just said. And like you can also, and I think this is one that is more general to kind of anyone who wants to start in esports as well, is kind of never stand still. And also this is hard because you have to, and I saw a big discussion about this lately in like the esports scene, but the thing about like grind and never taking time off and stuff like that, and it's a precarious balance, but you like put in everything you've got, but make sure that you also have the time for yourself to reflect on things and to rest and all that for everyone, which is a very important thing.
Right, there's always a balance.
Yes.
So how do you believe in that case the international community, for example, the United Nations or even policymakers, can contribute to the success of esports as well as women in gaming?
Well, I think they can have a very big leading and educational function because I think when you deal with organizations like the UN, who also just have tons of standing with the international community, if there are programs rolled out where they, like this interview, for instance, which I'm super happy that you guys are doing, and just to up the visibility of the women that are in the sphere and that have the kind of good stories, but also the stories of which we can learn a thing or two, and to caution for the future, and to kind of up just the visibility and the fact that there are a lot of women that are waiting in the wings to storm onto this scene and make things happen. I think that is all very, very important. Education and is so damn important, because I do honestly believe that some people are in a kind of spiral where they don't see that kind of the internal views they hold about like gaming, and I can only game with my buddies, and girls are not allowed or something like that, that they've always like thought that way, and nobody's ever told them, well, that's not the way to go. Like, I think also, programs and just bigger media as well should take a responsibility to look into these things. And maybe I'm too hopeful.
No, I don't think so at all. I mean, I'm sure your parents who initially 20 years ago thought that you shouldn't be playing video games and they were wondering, where am I taking my daughter to? Probably now accept your position a lot more, especially because you've gained such a respectful position. And I think a lot of people are hopeful that it becomes a bigger industry because of that. So, I mean, thank you, because you've created the careers and also shown people that this is potentially people can pursue these careers. So,
I mean, yeah, I think if my mom is convinced, then we can convince anybody, because she was like at the end of her wits with me. What do you think, actually, especially in terms of kind of like, it's always hard for me to put into words, because it's not about this one thing that's going to save everything, right? Or like solve everything. It's about this long process of the decades that are coming.
Yeah, I mean, I still receive the perceptions that gaming is just something that is a waste of time, that a lot of people just do it if they really don't have jobs. They're, in their basement in the dark, just playing games the whole day, the whole week, whatever. But I really do think that's changing. And I think you're right. Initiatives such as this really raise awareness to people that it is a huge industry, that it is developing. But at the same time, it's true. I mean, a lot of esports, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's located very centrally in states like California. But really expanding that, I think, would be definitely more beneficial to different regions and different states. And I'm saying states because I'm located in the United States.
Yeah.
But I mean, do you still believe that those perceptions, those stereotypes still exist? Or do you think that we're slowly countering those perceptions, especially with media, things like Twitch, YouTube, and even, interview conversations such as these?
I think slowly countering is definitely the way to go. And also like in the time where we've made up some ground in terms of a positive evolution for women, we've not been as inclusive to other groups of people. So like it's all just so connected to each other, and that's why I keep saying it looks like we're taking one step forward and then two steps backward, because there's no industry in the world that is fully inclusive and has no one, and that's a sad reality. But I would be very happy if esports would be a business where we can truly say in 10 years we're doing a good job, and we're being a positive influence in that regard if we look at the business in its entirety, and we're not there yet.
Yep. And hopefully, we do get there eventually in the future. Hopefully more people begin initiatives such as this to encourage more awareness about gaming, as well as women in gaming. I guess my final question to you in that case is, do you have any other messages, to women in esports or gaming, to companies, to academic organizations, to even international organizations, that you'd like to share about this field?
Yeah, I'd like to just, I don't know, for anyone that works with women and works with people that people are hesitant to accept, and it doesn't always have to be this radical, right? It's not always about someone is not allowed to do X. It's sometimes things that you don't really notice that much, and a situation happens in a meeting room, or a situation happens in a brainstorm, and there's an interaction that you don't feel good about if you're a woman, or you're another woman, or someone who's looking at the interaction, to just kind of constantly be vigilant of how we interact with each other and how we can support each other. I think that's very important, because it's so easy to be like, oh, well, the meeting's over and that happened, but whatever, it's been a long day, and that's also like, people are all under a lot of pressure. That's completely natural. But, we have to just be more vigilant, because we can't just go, oh, I didn't notice anymore. I don't think that flies anymore. And also, reach out to people if they want help in a certain department or whatever, and I think that's really important, to know that you can do that, and you should do that, and you shouldn't just be quiet or just let it go, basically.
That you should have those conversations.
Yes, the difficult conversations.
Yep. And do you have any questions for me?
Well, I actually like to know which kind of, if your games, like what your games of choice have been.
Yeah. So I've been playing games ever since I, was a baby. I actually have a brother, so we used to compete all the time, GameCube, computer games, anything like that. In high school, I actually started playing Tetris, and it was something that I played to kind of get my mind off of high school, off all my extracurricular activities, all of that. And then it just developed into something that was more of a community, more of a competitive aspect. And so I would go to tournaments, I would compete in online tournaments. I was actually one of the top ranked players for a bit, so I was really proud of myself internationally. And it provided a lot of great opportunities, and it helped me see, oh, okay, gaming and esports can definitely be a career. With Tetris, I didn't really know about Discord or Twitch or YouTube, any of that other thing, all of those things. But eventually in college and after college, I found out that esports really is a big industry, and that, people like myself could actually become involved in this industry. So I started playing League of Legends after college, started watching Twitch broadcasts, saw you for the first time. I was blown away that millions of people were watching League of Legends, millions of people were watching these games just for entertainment, just for fun. And that's basically got me hooked and involved in the industry. And so even throughout law school, I've still been involved in gaming. People find it so surprising. They say, shouldn't you be studying instead of playing games? But it really helps take my mind off of, every day studying in the books or anything like that. So as president of the Video Games Association at Columbia, we made it very, very big, partnered with a lot of organizations, had a lot of tours with a lot of tech companies like Samsung, Gen G even. And so it was actually a phenomenal experience. And that basically got me more interested in even entertainment law as well as esports. So yeah, it's been a great ride. And even having the opportunity to talk to you on this platform was because of esports and that initial interest in esports. So yeah, I still play Tetris, still play League of Legends as often as I can, and it's been great.
Yeah, it's so crazy that people say like, oh, why, you have to study, why would you do that? It's like, because it's like a hobby. What, you go out and get drunk or something? Like, I mean, surely this is a better thing to do. I'd love to know, because you were mentioning about going to these tournaments and taking your mind off things of school. And I know for me specifically, because people are always saying gaming is such a bad influence. And for me, it actually helped me deal with like a lot of, okay, how do I say this? Like, I was bullied in school, and it was hard for me to make friendships the kind of normal way. And I was socially not that adept at doing that, because I kind of closed myself off. But through playing online with these people who I got to know and who all shared the same passion, and then seeing them at LAN parties where we just play the whole weekend, I actually learned to talk and to make friends, because I had that cushion of, well, we're all the same and we like this gaming thing. And that helped me in the rest of my life. And I'm wondering if you had similar experience.
Yeah, actually, definitely. So some of the friends that I made in high school are still my friends today. And I'm not sure if you knew the people that you competed with at first and then eventually met them online or anything like that. But there are some people that I studied abroad in Spain, for example. I traveled to Spain, met people that I had, played with in Tetris, was completely blown away. My best friend in Spain, actually, I met playing Tetris, and it turned out that I'm from Colorado as well. She had family in Colorado. So we met in Colorado, met back up in Spain, and now every single year we meet up again just to hang out and talk. And of course, we don't play Tetris anymore, but we've become friends because of it. So I would say that I've made a lot of lifelong friends just playing these games. And even at Columbia, the first year of law school can be definitely a very competitive experience, but how competitive can you get? I mean, of course you can get competitive with the games, but just playing with your law school friends, on a daily, on a weekly basis, you become very close and you develop very close bonds outside of just, superficial relationships where you may not take it any further. So I think gaming has definitely contributed to the social aspect, but also just maintaining and making those lifelong friends. And I think what's so valuable about gaming, as well as just technology in general, is the opportunity to have connections on an international scale. For example, I mean, you're in Europe, I'm in New York, and we're still having this conversation, and how fantastic is that, especially during this pandemic. So I think it's just had a lot of benefits, especially personally, those relationships have been very, very valuable for me. So yes.
Yeah. It's so crazy too, because it's kind of like, people say like we always fall back on our kind of tribal instincts, but it's like when you meet someone who's also a gamer, you get this instant like, yes, yes, you kind of feel, and it's so weird because now it's become such a big thing that there's so many different ways, and like people play PlayStation get angry at people who play on the and it's whatever, but you still feel like, I feel like I can know this person. We're kind of part of the same thing. And that's how it can also just be so good for women in general, right? Like if, you know, you're dealing with certain things or whatnot, the fact that you should feel like you're stepping into something that is very inclusive and where you feel welcome and you can be whoever you want if you're raiding in WoW at 3 a.m. or whatever, you know, and that's kind of the beauty of our business, which I think, you know, should come out more.
Definitely. It's so encouraging to meet other women who are successful in gaming, who have also made it in gaming at the other end of that. And I'm curious to hear about your perspectives about this. I know that there are men and even women who basically say, you know, I'm using gaming to get boosted or, you know, to get raised in the ranks of my game, or that I want to use gaming to meet guys, or, you know, I want to get attention, things like that. Not necessarily women that are saying that, but men who are perceiving women as playing games for those intentions. And I'm just curious about what you think about that.
Well, it's also such a layered thing, and I think it does go back to kind of what I also got, like, oh, you want clout, that's why you're on an esports broadcast, because it's like a famous thing now.
Right.
But I think also, you know, it's becoming a social vehicle. So because like I have a long distance relationship, and I just play games, even the ones that I don't like as much, with my boyfriend, because that's fun and I can spend time with him like that. And I think, you know, it's not necessarily a bad thing to do something because a friend would like it or whatever, but it becomes a bit tricky when it's because you want internet points or to be associated with, I don't know, competitive gamers or whatnot. I think everyone should make their own choices. And it sucks because, I don't know, I think it's a lot of self-protection also if from men that are like, well, I thought I was the best in this, so this woman who's great at this, that can't be legit, you know, that can't be it. And that's sad.
It's so sad. It definitely is sad. But I think that you're right, there are different types of women, just as there are different types of men playing games, and we could have our own motivations, and that's completely fine. It doesn't mean that there has to be such intense judgment just because women are becoming more prominent in the gaming industry as well. So perfect. Do you have any other questions for me?
No, not really. I'd love to know, like, if you have any cool people that you're interviewing or like next steps in this program, I'd love to know.
All right. So we are, after finishing up this Talking Tech interview, which has been amazing, thank you so much. We're actually, I know that you recommended Frankie Ward to me, so we're actually going to be interviewing her soon with Kitty Plays, if you know who that is as well. So we're very excited about those interviews, and also the CEO of FlyQuest and Evil Geniuses, Nicola and Trisha. I think that will be an amazing
I love them.
interview. Oh, really? Okay, great. I know the esports community is so connected and so small, so that's great. And they're going to have a lot to say, I think, about the business aspect of esports as well, which will be very interesting. So thank you so much for joining us today. It has been an absolutely amazing interview, and I believe that concludes our Talking Tech interview. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jenny.